Hi, everybody. Welcome to Book Banter. I'm Raina Nielsen with Blue Cypress Books. And tonight I will be talking with George Bishop Jr. He is the author of Letter to My Daughter, which is the one I have here at my house, and The Night of the Comet, as well as a new book that's going to be coming out titled Jackson, maybe tentatively titled. We're going to find out about that. He is an actor, a world traveler, a jazz drummer, and I cannot wait to talk to him this evening. Also, if you have any comments while you're watching this evening, type them in the comment box and we will answer them in real time during the event. And without further ado, I'm going to click this. Hi, George.
Hey,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Pretty good this evening. This light's coming in a little crazy here. The days keep getting longer and longer for me. Well, for you as well, but this window behind me is
I've
evidently
got a window there.
letting in the light. Yours looks great though. It's coming in kind of sideways, and that's giving you this perfect light. I love it.
Good, good.
So, talk to me a little bit about when I'm reading your bio, you have so much going on, and it gives us so much to talk about. So there's an acting career, there's world travel for teaching, there's
Right.
writing, and now you're writing and playing drums. I want to know all of it. So, acting seems to be at the beginning of that bio. And you graduated from Loyola, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So, what took you, I guess, into acting? What did you go to school for? Let's go back. What did you go to school for?
Here, cheers. At Loyola, I studied English, Lit, and Communications, but I was also involved in the theater department. I did some plays there, and I was in the jazz band for non-majors, playing drums.
Yes. So on the side.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention this to you before we started. I'm also a theater kid.
Go on. Yeah.
We have like quite a bit in common in not once you get started. But yeah, I was also a theater kid and went to school for theater and stuff. So when you got out of school, you picked theater or acting, or did acting pick you?
Well, I moved to Los Angeles because I didn't have any other options, I guess. And I started taking acting classes there and started auditioning and got lucky with some stage plays and commercials. And I was there for 8 years, and I did mostly commercials was how I made my living. And some bad TV shows and lots of live theater.
Look, I tried to get a copy of Teen Vamp, and I haven't been able to figure out how yet, but I'm going to. And when I do finally get to watch it, I'm gonna give you my honest review. It's going to be wonderful. I already know.
No, you don't have to look that hard for it. I mean, don't even bother. You don't have to.
Oh no, doing it. I love those B movies. They're so bad, they're good. So good, they're bad. Love it. That's gonna happen.
But that was like the pinnacle of my career, you could say, was the movie Teen Vamp. And I was the Teen Vamp. And although the movie, it originated in Los Angeles, it was shot here in Shreveport over a month, one winter. Yeah.
So do you since you went to school for writing, did that help you in your
No, but
acting
I
career
didn't
at
go to school for writing. I mean, it was English Lit, right?
all?
Although I
Yes.
did study writing. My first writing class was an independent study with John Bigonnet years ago.
Yes.
At Loyola,
I
yes.
saw him on Sunday bringing
Did
in
you?
books to the store. Yes.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, did the writing help my acting?
Well, I mean, it's all stories. So did
Yeah.
you feel a connection
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah. I mean, even when I was in Los Angeles, I was still writing, but kind of on the side, and wrote some plays and wrote some plays with friends, and we produced a few of them. So that's what I was doing. And I was writing songs too, and just short stuff. But when so after I was there for 8 years, then I hadn't worked for a while and I was running out of money. And so I volunteered to be an English teacher in Czechoslovakia. This was 1992 when it had just broken away from the Soviet Union. So I
Yeah.
went as a volunteer English teacher. And that was when I decided that I was going to take more seriously my writing, because I wasn't doing the acting anymore and I wasn't playing music. I was playing music in Los Angeles too.
Mhm.
So I left all that behind and I said, right, I'm going to try this writing thing now. And I worked very hard at it, and I built up the discipline of writing every day, and reading a lot. And that also is when I began submitting my first stories to journals and
Mhm.
to contests. And this is interesting. I even submitted to the Faulkner Festival when I
Yeah.
was living overseas, some of my first submissions. And I remember it was like before internet even, or before email. And I would print out my stories and my manuscripts and bring them to the post office in Bratislava or Istanbul or wherever I was, and wrap it up and mail it off and hope that it made it to New Orleans. And a couple of times I got like runner up or something in the Faulkner Festival, right?
Great.
And I used to visit New Orleans occasionally because my family was in Baton Rouge. And one time I visited Joe DeSalvo at Faulkner House. And I
Yeah.
told him, well, I submitted my manuscript here and I'm one of the runners up in your contest. And he said, "Oh, that's fine, son." And I said, "I hope someday my book might be in your bookstore." And he said,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's good to hear that, son." Uh,
Right, because he's heard it. He's heard it. He's like, "Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, all right, kid. What can I do?"
but
Yeah.
but it happened eventually, and Joe and I became pretty close. Yeah.
So, how long did you spend traveling around teaching English or teaching?
Well, altogether, I taught overseas about 12 years, on and off. And during that time, I came back to get my MFA at UNC Wilmington, and I
Mhm.
taught there also for 5 years. And then I went
That's
back overseas, and then eventually I moved back to Louisiana.
that is, I mean, it's fascinating because it's one of those things that people think about doing, and then you're doing it, and I imagine that when it happens, you're living your life. You are just living your life. So you've applied for a job, and the job happens to be over here, and now you're teaching over here, and then and everyone's like, "How do you do that?" And you're like, "I don't know. I just applied for a job."
Yeah. And
Um,
also, Raina, there's a lot of desperation involved too. It's like, oh, hell, where am I going to teach now? And I need a job. So,
well,
there's
and there's
that.
those programs. If you're willing to sign up for Czechoslovakia right after, when they're super desperate for have people over there, then your name gets bumped to the top of the list.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you were writing this whole time,
I
but
was. Yeah.
these both of these times in your life, the acting and the traveling around, seem
Mm,
like amazing inspiration
mm.
for writing. Um, do you agree? How do you feel like how do you feel like the acting influenced or helped or hurt, honestly?
Well, first of all, about like the influence of just living in Los Angeles or living overseas, I wrote about those things too, and I wrote some earlier novels and stories that are all hidden in that filing cabinet over there. And there was at least one expat novel and a novel about an actor who lived in Los Angeles. Uh, but those never saw the light of day, probably for the better. Um, and so uh, and everybody has always said, "Wow, you lived in all these exotic places. You must have so much to write about." But interestingly, I mean, even for me, my first published novel was set here in Louisiana. Uh,
Right.
the second one was too. They're both set in Louisiana. So, and I wrote those. Well, the first one I wrote while I was overseas, Letter to My Daughter, uh, because I don't know. I haven't been able to tackle that real expat novel yet. You know the saying that like it's easier to write about a place after you've moved away
Yeah.
from it and you've been away for a while. So maybe that's the case here.
Well, and do you feel like when you were writing your first two novels and you were in other locations that you were kind of trying to get back, or you're just writing more of what you know that's ingrained from growing up in the area?
So you want to hear the story of my first novel, how
I
I came to write
absolutely,
that?
yes.
So I had actually, I was in India and I had been working on the novel that I just got an agent for now. This novel called
Oh,
Jackson that you mentioned
yes.
earlier. But this was years ago already. This was when I was teaching in India. So I'd been working on that novel for a long time. And I went, true story, I finished my job in India. I was doing teacher training with the State Department. And for a vacation, I went on this camel safari in the desert. And I actually had like in the like pack on the camel my notebooks for this novel that I'd been working on, thinking that I would still find some time to work on that. And in the camel safari, they bring you out in the desert and they pitch a tent and they cook the meal for you and everything. And I went to bed in the tent in the desert that night, and I dreamed that whole novel, Letter to My Daughter, true story.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I knew the novel like so well. I knew the title of it even, and I knew kind of like all the main events in the novel, and the voice of the novel, and I wrote it down like in outline form in my journal, and then I set it aside for like half a year or something because like it's like it had already been written practically,
Hmm.
and I already knew it so well that I didn't even have to worry about it. And then I went back to school for a while and I was involved in other things. But then when I finally sat down to write it, I wrote it very quickly. At least for me, I wrote it in about a year. And then it also got published very quickly too. So that's how that came about. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't thinking about it at all. It just like came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was just you were working, in fact, on something completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just one of those cases where people say that this story needed to be told, like it was telling you needed to tell it.
I guess. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so between your first book and your second book is a much shorter time period than your second and your third. So did you have that the night of the comet like ready to go by the time?
No,
No.
no. As soon as I got the deal with Letter to My Daughter, then they said, "Okay, well, what's your next book?" And and uh, and it was only then that I came up with the idea for that and started working on it. And so that book took about 3 years, I guess.
Mhm.
And maybe it helped that it was under contract, and so I had a deadline for it.
Right.
So that probably helped. And then after The Night of the Comet, I actually wrote a whole other book that was never sold, and I worked a few years on that, and so that's also there in
Oh,
the filing.
sitting.
And so then after that, then I started working on Jackson again, the one that I had in the saddlebag on the camel ride.
Hmm.
And so I went back to that in about 2015. So I've been working on that one for a long, long time.
Yeah. So
But
like
it
right
was a lot of
after.
it was a lot of research too for that.
Well, I imagine. And just, I mean, I know only what you posted on Facebook. So I know like a paragraph and a half, a very long elevator ride pitch. That's what I know. um, but with novels like this, as a reader, I'm like, how much of it is real and how much of it isn't, right? So on your side, you have to do all of this research, and then you get to pick. You're picking the pieces
Yeah, yeah,
that
that's it
work.
exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. I researched it and took notes for a whole year, but I have to say the research, people kind of roll their eyes at that and think it's so grueling. But I mean, honest to God, it's the easiest part of writing, the research, because you're just reading every day and whatever interests you and whatever guides the story and taking notes. It's great. It's like a big reading holiday.
I love research.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love research. I mean, one of my favorite things to do in school were research papers, and people will be like, "Oh God!" As soon as the assignment comes in, or you see it on the syllabus, or whatever it is, everyone else is groaning, and I'm like, "Yes!" Like, do we get to pick it ourselves, or do they have to tell us? And either way, I'm like, okay, because I'm learning something new.
Right,
You
right.
know, piles of index cards. I'm like in
Yeah.
heaven. I'm like, yes. Um, so that part, I that would be my favorite part as well. No matter how much you like writing, there's days where you it's just not there. It's not happening. You're not into it. But I can always go and read something else and come up with a couple of index cards and, like, I'm winning today. I've got,
Yeah, but that raises the other question too, Raina, is that how many writers really do like writing? Like, honest to God, it's so much easier to read than to write, isn't it?
oh,
It's grueling. It's so hard. I mean,
I think
I
with
I've been doing it for a long time, but even when I do it, I mean, it's not like I get any great pleasure from it. I'm not like writing and laughing and feeling so good about it. It's grueling.
Well, and it's part of, if you have the luxury to only do your art for fun when you feel like it, when the inspiration strikes, whatever, then yes, it is always, a good time because you're only doing it when it's a good time.
Well, maybe you're right. Yeah, yeah.
But as soon as you start to do something with it, even if, like we were talking earlier about selling, like, your pencil drawings at an art market, if
Right,
even that, as soon as you sign up for that art market, you need to fill a table with art.
right,
Now
right.
your fun, I just draw while I'm drinking my coffee in the morning. Oh, look, and people have told me it looks cool. Now I have to make 50 so that I can definitely fill a table. And it immediately doesn't, it's not always not fun, but that the work element gets involved
It's a
and
job. It becomes a job. Yeah,
becomes a job.
and also the pressure that you want it to be better than your last book, and you want it to be able to be published, and you want people to buy it, and you want it to be good. You want it to be as good as you can make it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's work. Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, like, for me, I do that thing. I will bail on a commitment to that. Not I would just won't even commit to it. I'm not gonna bail. If I tell you I'll do it, I'll do it. But I'm just not even gonna tell you I'm going to
You're
because I
talking
already
about
know.
writing or just
I'm talking about
life
writing.
in general?
I'm talking about writing. I'm talking about writing because I've written short stories, I've written poetry, I've never written a novel, but and people sometimes they'll read it and they go, "Oh, well, this is good," and I go, "Yeah, I'm not touching that. Like I wrote that 20 years ago. I'm not touching it
Mm,
because, and it's my own thing, but it's exactly what you're talking about. Is this constant needing to the challenge to yourself?
right, right.
It needs to be a little better. And then once you do get a reading public, it's got to be as good, right? And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want it to build, and that's the other thing too. So let me ask you this: Do
Yes.
you carve out time, or have you figured out how to carve out time for pleasure writing? Do you at all derive pleasure still from that?
Nobody has asked me that. Pleasure writing. I don't even know what that is anymore. Pleasure writing.
Uh, uh,
I mean,
whatever it means
I
to
thought you were
you.
just gonna I thought you were gonna ask about my writing routine. I'm very
I
good
can
at
do
that.
that too.
I'm very disciplined. I mean, I've been doing that now since I moved back to New Orleans in 2010. I've been writing full time, basically. I mean, that's
Yeah.
been my job. So I sit down every morning and I do it with my coffee for I mean, at least on lunchtime, and then usually after. I'm really disciplined about it, and I keep like a clock so that even if I get up to get more coffee, like I'll stop the timer, and because getting coffee doesn't count for writing for me.
That I do that same thing.
Do you?
I have a timer on my phone, and depending on what I'm working on, sometimes I set a weekly timer because I need to do X amount of time, and sometimes that's all on Monday, and sometimes it's an hour a day. It depends on what life is doing, but it's I do that same thing, and you're absolutely right. If I go to the bathroom, if somebody comes in and interrupts me, if something, I hear a bang and I've got to go figure it out, you got to stop the timer, because if I don't, then I'll get sidetracked potentially on something, come back, and I have not worked for an hour.
Right,
you have to do it that way.
Right.
Okay, so we have a question. I've always wanted to teach in other countries. How do you get started doing that? So how did you? I imagine the process is.
I'm looking for the question. Does it show up somewhere?
It should be on the right-hand side under comments.
Hey, Linda.
There we go.
Oh, okay. You want me to answer that?
Yeah. I don't know.
I went as a volunteer initially, so that's one easy way to do it. And this was in Bratislava, Slovakia, where basically if you could teach English, I mean, if you could speak English, you could get a job teaching English. And I had no experience teaching before that. But after that, I enjoyed it enough that I got trained up and I got certified to be to teach English as a foreign language with this intensive 1 month, 100-hour training course. That's very common. And so that's one thing that you can look into. It's it's a really common training course, and then they will even help place you at language schools or high schools around the world. But then after that, eventually I went back and I finally got a master's degree in teaching English as a foreign language. But initially I just went to the countries that really needed English teachers. That's how I did it.
So when you came back and got your degree in teaching English,
yes.
Did you do that so that you could go back to countries maybe you couldn't go to before? Or okay.
Yeah, and then I was able to get a job, for instance, teaching in Tokyo with a University of Montana program that was partnered with a Japanese university. But I needed the master's degree to do that, even though I've been teaching for many years already. I didn't have the degree to get those other jobs.
My mother-in-law actually taught in Japan, but she taught high school.
Yeah,
she taught English in the 90s. So
the JET program.
Yeah. Okay, so Linda has a follow-up question to that. Where is your favorite place to write? So I'm gonna elaborate. I'm gonna know how worldwide, and then maybe like in the city or
worldwide, huh? Where has my favorite place to write been? I don't know. I don't know.
It's too hard.
I don't know. But okay, my where I write here is in the armchair in the corner over there. Not at this desk. This desk is just a prop. The books they're not real books. It's just
it looks great though. It's working for you.
I have an armchair over there where I slump down and I write every morning with my laptop on a board across the arms of the armchair.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I spend a lot of time in my hammock outside. That hammock I bought 2 years ago is the best purchase. I mean, that I can remember in a long.
Yeah, I could never do that outside in a hammock because already that sounds too like relaxed and comfortable and distracting. How can you possibly write in a hammock outside?
It is relaxing. I think that's why. Because in my house, like I don't know, I'm a mom and I got there's just stuff happening all the time.
Right.
In the house, it's like a constant. If I get up I'll pass 5 chores that need to be done. And then I'm sidetracked and I'm bad at that. So it's a getaway that isn't a pick up all my stuff and go to a coffee shop. That's what it is. And so I think that's more so than I do enjoy reading in my hammock as well, but I
Yeah.
can get a lot of not business work, but sort of inspiration work done out there, because it is, I'm if I'm just filling in spreadsheets, it's just I've ruined my hammock time. But if I'm trying to write poetry, or if I'm trying to write, even like once I get the facts in an article, once I'm trying to piece that all together in a story, then that I get that done.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, you can write poetry in a hammock because, I mean, poetry is nothing, I could lay in a hammock and write
Oh, see,
poetry.
there you go.
But I could not write in a coffee shop, I don't think, because there's too many distractions. And also, when I'm writing, you had a question about this earlier. Like, I'll stand up and pace, and I'll try to like say the dialogue or the lines aloud. I
Mhm.
want to talk them out loud, and you can't do that in a coffee house without looking
Yeah.
crazy. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I like my privacy when I'm writing.
Well, and okay, so what you just said about speaking your lines out loud, right? I Do you pull any stuff from your days of acting and your acting training to do that stuff? Because anytime I was doing acting, I would do that a lot to get into character and to,
Yeah, yeah,
speak.
yeah, yeah. I do. I draw on that training from acting. Like in acting, when you had a character, you would have to do a character profile. Or what is
Yeah,
it called? And like you would even like
yeah.
fill out a sheet with like your character's background, and you would have, and I mean, if you did it properly, you would have to imagine like the whole life of your character off
Mhm.
stage, because like the character description in a play or a movie script, it's usually just one line. It says, uh, middle-aged school teacher, likes books. That's
Right.
so if you're like a good actor, then you have to fill out the whole biography by yourself. You make it up, right?
Hmm.
And you write it, and you imagine what your character had to eat right before they came into the scene, or what they were doing just a minute ago before the scene started, or what they did that morning, or their whole childhood conflicts and their relationship with their parents. You can do all that as an actor. So yeah, I try to do the same thing with writing. Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about this new book, which was serendipitous for me, because we had been talking about, like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And then like 2 days ago, you posted on your Facebook, hey, I've got this brand new book. And I'm like, yay. So tell me a little bit about this book that you've been working on for years,
For
from
years.
from
Yes.
camel safari days.
Yes.
Um, what's it about? Give us.
So the title is Jackson. And just to be clear, I was posting about getting a new agent for the
Yes.
book finally, which
Oh,
I've been working on for a long time too, just the business aspect of it. So that's what I'm celebrating. I've got a new agent for this book that I finally finished at the end of last year. And so she'll start shopping the book around soon. Anyway, it's called Jackson, and it's named after the small town of Jackson, Louisiana, which is where I grew up, because my father worked at the hospital there as a psychiatrist. If you're from Louisiana, you might know the town because it's the home of the the old Jackson Asylum, the oldest and largest state mental hospital in Louisiana. And so my father worked there as a psychiatrist for many years, and that's where he raised his family. We lived on a house on the grounds, and I was there until like from the time I was 2 years old, 12 years old, or something like that, or 10 years old, about 8 years, I guess,
yeah.
my childhood. And so I always knew, or I always thought that I would have to write about that experience someday. And I tried many times over the years. But so what finally provided like the through line to the story was when I was researching the hospital, I dug into the work of this really controversial psychiatrist from Tulane University called Dr. Robert Heath. He founded the Department of Psychiatry at Tulane in the 1950s, and my father studied with him. So
Wow.
he's kind of infamous because he conducted these experiments on patients, some of the first brain implant experiments in the US, where he was drilling holes in patients' skulls and putting electrodes into their brains to try to alter their behavior, to try to cure them. And when you read about these operations, they just sound insane what he was doing at the time. And so I took that medical background and I set it at the hospital in Jackson. And so that's like the background of this story.
I want to read this so bad.
All right. Well,
so it's working. As soon as I read, you know, you're like, oh, I got an agent for a new book. And I'm like, oh, great. And then I read the paragraph and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And like I was saying to you, like, I love things like that because it's parsing out the true history, you know, to the fictionalization, the story you're going to put into that setting. And now knowing that, you know, you actually lived on the grounds of this hospital that you set it on. Okay, so awesome, amazing, and I'm definitely keeping my eye out for it. And obviously, I know that you'll keep me informed. One day when we get arcs, just put me on the short list for that because I definitely will be reading that. And yeah, I just thank you so much for, you know, joining me for Book Banter and having this conversation with me because, you know, we've known each other for years and I've known nothing about you except for the bio on your website.
And now I know that you are a musician and an actor too. And so you're going to come over here and
oh goodness
someday.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say yes. We're just gonna go with it. Just all right, everybody. You can get George's books at Blue Cypress, and we will keep an eye out for Jackson in the future. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Linda, for making your comments. And George, have a lovely night.